My name is Jasmine Woods, and 3 months ago I became convinced my husband was having an affair. Looking back now, I almost wish he had been. At least that would have made sense. The truth, I discovered, was far worse than infidelity. It shattered my husband's entire life, exposed a lie that had lasted for decades, and forced us both to confront a woman he had buried in his heart long before I ever met him. I'll start at the moment everything broke open. I was standing in the shadows of a private driveway in Surrey, alone, in the dark, watching my husband face a woman I had never seen before. She was older, elegant, silver-streaked hair, the kind of woman who carries herself like someone who has survived things most people couldn't imagine. Ferguson stood several feet away from her, his body rigid, his jaw tight, his whole posture saying everything his mouth wasn't. They weren't embracing, they weren't laughing, they weren't doing any of the things I had spent 3 months terrifying myself with. What they were doing was somehow worse. They were arguing, quietly, intensely, the kind of argument that has been going on for years. I couldn't hear everything, but then the wind shifted and his voice reached me, and what I heard made absolutely no sense. I stood frozen in that driveway, unable to breathe, unable to think, asking myself one question over and over again. Who is this woman, and what is my husband hiding from me? To answer that, I have to take you back 3 months.
My husband Ferguson and I had been married for 8 years. Like most couples, we weren't perfect. We argued about bills. We disagreed about groceries. Sometimes we went to bed irritated over things that seemed ridiculous the next morning. But beneath all of that, we were solid. At least I thought we were. Then Ferguson started changing. At first it was subtle. He became protective of his phone. Whenever a message arrived, he would turn the screen away from me. If I walked into a room while he was on a call, the call would end shortly after. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Everyone deserves privacy. Then came the Sunday disappearances. Every Sunday evening around 7 o'clock, he would shower, get dressed, grab his car keys and leave. No explanation, no details, just a brief kiss on my forehead and the same sentence every single time. Don't wait up. The first few weeks I ignored it. Then the pattern continued, week after week, month after month. One Sunday, I casually asked where he was going. He hesitated, just for a second, but I noticed. Just handling something. Handling what? He never explained. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt something ugly crawl into my mind. Suspicion. I hated it. The way it made me see everything differently. The way every delayed reply felt significant. The way every unexplained absence started to feel like evidence of something I didn't want to name. Then one evening, I walked into our living room and caught him staring at a photograph. The moment he noticed me, he slipped it back into a folder, too quickly, almost guiltily. What was that? Nothing. His answer came too fast. Then he changed the subject. That night I barely slept because Ferguson Woods had never been a liar, and suddenly he was acting like one. The following Sunday, I made a decision. I was going to find out where he was going, no matter what it cost me. At exactly 7 o'clock, Ferguson left the house. 5 minutes later, I followed him. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. Part of me prayed I was wrong. Part of me prayed I would discover some harmless explanation and spend the rest of my life feeling guilty for doubting him. Instead, I followed him across town, past neighborhoods I recognized, past restaurants, past shopping centers, further than I expected, much further. Eventually, he turned into a private road, lined with massive oak trees. I frowned. I had never been there before. The road ended at a large estate, surrounded by stone walls and iron gates. My stomach dropped. A woman. It had to be a woman. What other explanation was there? I parked further down the road and watched. A security guard opened the gates. Ferguson drove inside. 10 minutes later, another vehicle entered the property. An older woman stepped out. Even from a distance, I could tell she carried herself with confidence. Elegant clothing, graceful posture, silver-streaked hair. The kind of woman who looked powerful without saying a word. She walked toward the main house. A few moments later, Ferguson emerged from the front entrance. I expected them to embrace. Instead, he stopped several feet away from her.
His body instantly became rigid, defensive, angry. I couldn't hear everything. But then the wind carried his voice toward me, and what I heard made absolutely no sense. "Stop pretending you're my mother." The woman froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she answered quietly, "I've never stopped being your mother." My entire body went cold. I stared at them, unable to breathe, unable to think, because there was only one problem. Ferguson's mother was dead. At least, that's what he had told me. That's what he told everyone. In 8 years of marriage, I had never once heard him describe it differently. Whenever anyone asked about his mother, his response was always the same. Cold, brief, final. My mother is dead. Not we don't talk. Not she left us. Not it's complicated. Just my mother is dead. Conversation over. So who was this woman? And why was she claiming to be his mother? I should have left. I should have gotten back into my car and gone home. Instead, I made the decision that changed everything. I got out of my vehicle and I walked toward the estate.
The closer I got to the estate, the more convinced I became that I was making a terrible mistake. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't some jealous wife from a television drama. I was a woman who had followed her husband and stumbled into something she didn't understand. Before I could reach the house, I heard Ferguson's voice again. This time it was sharper, colder. "I don't know why you keep doing this." The older woman stood perfectly still. "I keep doing it because you're my son." "Stop saying that." The words hit her like a slap. For the first time, I saw pain flash across her face. Not anger, not frustration, pain. The kind that had clearly been there for years. "Ferguson." "No," he cut her off immediately. "You don't get to say my name like that." I watched the woman lower her eyes. For a second, she looked less like a powerful woman and more like someone carrying a burden she was tired of carrying alone. Then Ferguson reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He shoved it toward her. "Take it." She didn't move. "Take it," he repeated. "I don't want your money." "It's not money." Her eyes flickered toward the envelope. "What is it?" "The documents your lawyer sent." The woman sighed. "I told Daniel not to pressure you." "Well, he did." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ferguson's voice dropped. "Why won't you just leave me alone?" That question seemed to break something inside her. Because when she answered, her voice trembled. "Because I already lost too much time." My stomach tightened. I had expected secrets. I had expected lies. I had even expected another woman. What I hadn't expected was this. Whatever was happening between them, it wasn't simple, and it definitely wasn't an affair. Suddenly, Ferguson turned. For a horrifying second, I thought he had seen me. Instead, he walked toward his car. A moment later, he drove away, leaving the woman standing alone in the driveway. I should have followed him home. Instead, I found myself walking toward her. The woman looked up as I approached. The moment our eyes met, something strange happened. She wasn't surprised, not even slightly, almost as though she had expected me. "Jasmine." I stopped walking. My heart nearly stopped. "How do you know my name?" A sad smile touched her lips. "I know a great deal about you." Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. "Who are you?" She studied me for several seconds. Then she gave the answer that cracked my world open. "My name is Felicia Hale." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it made my chest tighten. "And Ferguson?" I asked. She swallowed. For the first time, I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "Ferguson is my son." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the explanation, something. Instead, she simply stood there, looking at me with an expression that felt heartbreakingly familiar. The way mothers look at photographs they haven't seen in years. The way people look at things they have lost. "No," I said quietly. "That's impossible." She nodded slowly. "I know."
My husband told me his mother died. A shadow crossed her face. Yes, that answer stunned me more than anything. No denial, no outrage, no attempt to defend herself. Just, yes. I crossed my arms. If you're really his mother, why would he tell people that? Felicia looked toward the road where Ferguson had disappeared. For several moments, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Because that's easier than telling them the truth." The words sent chills through me. What truth? She looked back at me,
And for the first time, I noticed how exhausted she seemed. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent years carrying grief nobody else could see. "Would you like some tea?" I blinked. "What?" She gave a faint smile. "You have questions." "I have a lot of questions." So did Ferguson. Something about that answer stopped me because there was no bitterness in her voice, no resentment, only sadness. A few minutes later, I found myself sitting across from a woman I should not have been meeting, inside a home I should not have entered, trying to understand a story that made less sense with every passing minute. The estate was beautiful, but what caught my attention wasn't the furniture or the artwork or the expensive decor. It was the photographs, hundreds of them, everywhere, on shelves, on tables, along the walls, and every single one featured the same person, Ferguson, as a child, as a teenager, as a university student, as a grown man, my husband. My breath caught. I stood slowly, walking toward one of the frames, a graduation photograph, another, a football trophy, another, his university acceptance picture, another, our wedding day. I turned toward Felicia. My voice barely worked. "How did you get these?" She looked down at her tea, then quietly answered, "Because I never stopped being his mother." The room fell silent, and for the first time since arriving at that estate, I began to wonder if everything Ferguson believed about this woman was wrong. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs, hundreds of them. Photographs of Ferguson growing up. Photographs Felicia should never have possessed if she was truly the heartless woman he believed her to be. The image that haunted me most wasn't even from his childhood. It was our wedding photograph. Felicia had a copy, not displayed proudly, not framed in some grand location. It sat quietly on a side table beside a reading chair, as though she looked at it often, as though she treasured it. That didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. The following morning, I found Ferguson sitting alone on our patio, coffee in one hand, his phone in the other, lost in thought. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. Instead, I sat beside him. "You went to see her again." His body stiffened instantly. Slowly, he lowered his coffee cup. "You followed me." It wasn't a question. I nodded. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. He didn't get angry. He looked tired, deeply tired. "Did she tell you her story?" I hesitated. "Not really." A humorless laugh escaped him. "Of course not." I studied him carefully. "Who is she, Ferguson?" His jaw tightened. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said quietly, "Someone I should have stopped thinking about years ago. She's your mother." The words hung between us, cold and uncomfortable. He stared straight ahead. I know. That answer caught me off guard. Not because of what he said, because of how he said it. No surprise, no emotion, nothing. As though he were discussing a stranger. Then why tell everyone she's dead? His eyes hardened. Because she is. "Ferguson! She's dead to me, Jasmine." The finality in his voice sent a chill through me. I buried that part of my life years ago. Then he stood and walked inside, ending the conversation just like that. But he had made one mistake. He hadn't denied she was his mother, and that meant he had known all along, which created a new question. If Ferguson knew she was alive, why did he hate her so much? I needed answers that Ferguson was not going to give me. So 2 days later, I made a decision. I was going to visit the one place that might tell me what my husband never would. I drove to Andy and Pauline Woods. My in-laws had always been kind to me. Andy especially. Everyone loved Andy. He was the type of man who remembered birthdays, the type who donated to charities, the type who never raised his voice. When I arrived, Pauline greeted me warmly. Andy was reading the newspaper. Nothing about either of them suggested secrets. Nothing about them suggested guilt. Which made what happened next even more unsettling. I saw Felicia. The reaction was immediate. Pauline's smile vanished. Andy's newspaper froze in midair for a second, but I noticed. Then the expressions disappeared, as though they had never been there. Andy folded the newspaper carefully. What did she want? The question bothered me. Not how is she? Not where did you see her? Not even why. Just what did she want? I sat down slowly. She says she's Ferguson's mother. Neither of them spoke. The silence felt wrong. Finally, Pauline sighed dramatically. That woman. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Not anger, contempt. Years of it. She abandoned that boy, Pauline continued. She walked away and never looked back. Andy nodded sadly. Ferguson suffered because of her. I listened carefully, waiting, watching. Then why is she trying to see him now? I asked. Pauline shrugged. Money. The answer came too quickly. Money? Of course. Andy rubbed his forehead. Felicia has always been selfish. The words sounded rehearsed, as though they had been repeated many times before. Maybe for years. I should have accepted their explanation. Instead, I found myself thinking about the photographs, the school pictures, the graduation pictures, the wedding picture. A selfish woman doesn't spend decades collecting pieces of a child's life. A selfish woman doesn't keep evidence of every milestone she wasn't allowed to attend. Something wasn't adding up, and for the first time, I began wondering whether Andy and Pauline knew it. 3 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I didn't recognize. Margaret Bennett. I almost ignored it. Almost. Thankfully, I didn't, because that phone call changed everything. Mrs. Woods? Yes. My name is Margaret Bennett. The woman sounded elderly, nervous. I knew Felicia years ago. My pulse quickened immediately. How did you get my number? I asked. A brief pause. Then, Felicia gave it to me. She said if she ever decided to speak to someone, to call you, not Ferguson. You. I sat very still. Why me? Another pause. Because she said you had kind eyes, and because she knew her son wasn't ready to hear this yet. But she believed you might be. The room felt smaller suddenly. I think, Margaret said carefully, it's time somebody told Ferguson the truth. I sat upright. What truth? There was a long silence. Then Margaret spoke words that would haunt me forever. Felicia didn't leave her son. My heart started pounding. What did you mean? Another silence. Longer this time. Then, she was forced out. The room suddenly felt too small. I gripped the phone tighter. Forced out by who? Margaret's answer came softly, but it landed like a bomb. By Andy and Pauline. I drove to Margaret Bennett's house the very next morning. The entire journey, I kept hoping she was mistaken, that somehow there had been a misunderstanding. Because if what she was suggesting was true, then Ferguson's entire life had been built on a lie. Margaret lived alone in a small cottage on the edge of town. Nothing about her looked threatening. She was a frail woman in her 70s with kind eyes and trembling hands. But the moment I mentioned Andy Woods, her expression darkened. I knew this day would come, she said quietly. She led me inside and disappeared briefly into another room. When she returned, she was carrying a worn cardboard box, the kind people use to store things they can't bear to throw away. She placed it on the table between us. What is this? I asked. Margaret stared at the box for several seconds. Proof. A chill ran through me. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, legal documents, newspaper clippings, 25 years of buried history. I picked up the first photograph. It showed a young Felicia, beautiful, smiling, holding a little boy in her arms. Ferguson. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The happiness in that photograph felt genuine, natural, impossible to fake. She adored that child, Margaret said softly. Everyone knew it. I looked up. Then why did she leave? Margaret's eyes filled with sadness. She didn't want to. I felt my pulse quicken. Margaret took a deep breath. Then she began telling me a story that sounded almost impossible. Years earlier, Andy Woods had started an affair with Pauline. At first, it was a secret. Then it wasn't. Soon, everyone knew except Felicia. When she finally discovered the truth, she confronted him. Andy promised to end it. He didn't. Instead, Pauline became bolder, more aggressive, more determined, and little by little, Felicia's marriage became a nightmare. What about Ferguson? I asked. Margaret's voice trembled. He was everything to her. The old woman reached into the box and pulled out a folded document. It was a copy of a custody petition. Felicia's name covered every page. My stomach dropped. She fought for him? Margaret nodded. With everything she had. I stared at the paperwork, unable to speak, because this wasn't the behavior of a woman trying to escape motherhood. This was the behavior of a woman desperately trying to keep her child. Then Margaret handed me a letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine. I began reading. Halfway through, my vision blurred. The letter wasn't addressed to a lawyer or a judge. It was addressed to Ferguson.
My darling boy, if you ever read this one day, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single second. A tear rolled down my cheek. I swallowed hard and kept reading. Every day I wake up hoping I will see you again. Every night I go to sleep praying you are safe. My hand started shaking. She wrote these to him? Margaret nodded. Every birthday. I looked back into the box. There were dozens of envelopes. Dozens. My chest tightened. She never missed a year, Margaret said. Not once. Not in 25 years. The room fell completely silent. Then Margaret said the words that finally shattered the last of my doubts. The day Felicia left, she didn't leave because she stopped loving Ferguson. I looked up. Then why? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Because she was told something terrible would happen to him if she stayed. The air seemed to leave my lungs. What? She nodded slowly. Yes. Margaret's voice cracked, but she was terrified. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Margaret said something I will never forget. She believed losing her son was better than burying him.
I closed my eyes because suddenly I understood. Not completely, but enough. Enough to see the impossible choice Felicia had faced. Enough to understand the fear. Enough to understand the sacrifice. And enough to realize that Ferguson deserved to know everything. But before I went home, I asked Margaret one more question. One that had been sitting quietly at the back of my mind since she first called. What happened to Felicia after she left? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in her expression. Not sadness this time. Something closer to pride. She built herself back up, Margaret said simply, from nothing. She had left that house with one bag and whatever strength she had left inside her. No money to speak of, no connections she could safely use. For 2 years, she cleaned offices, saved every penny. Then she got her real estate license, bought one small flat, then another, then a commercial property, then 5 more. I stared at Margaret. The same Felicia? The very same. Margaret almost smiled. She never remarried, never even tried. She said the only man she ever wanted to build a life for was Ferguson. So that is what she did. She built it for him. Every property, every contract, every early morning and every late night for 25 years. All of it registered in a holding company whose silent beneficiary from the very first purchase was her son. I sat back in my chair, unable to speak. Because this woman, who Ferguson had declared dead, who Andy and Pauline had painted as selfish and cold and undeserving, had spent a quarter of a century building an empire in her son's name, waiting for the day she could hand it to him. And he didn't even know she existed. That evening, I returned home, carrying copies of the documents, the photographs, the letters, the truth. Ferguson was sitting in the living room when I walked in. One look at my face and he immediately stood. What happened? I placed the box on the table. His eyes narrowed. What is this? I swallowed. Then I said the words that changed his life forever. I think your father lied to you. The room went completely silent. For a moment, Ferguson simply stared at me. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh. No, Ferguson. No. His voice sharpened. My father isn't perfect, Jasmine. I know. But he would never lie about something like this. My heart broke for him. Because I had believed the same thing. Before Margaret, before the letters, before the evidence. Slowly, I removed one envelope from the box, then another, then another. Ferguson's expression changed. The confidence disappeared. The certainty disappeared. And for the first time since I had known him, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. I slid the oldest letter across the table. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Then he saw the first line. My darling boy. The color drained from his face. And I knew. The lie was finally starting to crack. For a long time, Ferguson just sat there, staring at the letter. Not reading it, just staring, as though he was afraid of what would happen if he unfolded it completely. I understood, because once he read it, there would be no going back. Whatever certainty he had carried for 25 years would be gone.
Finally, he opened it. The room became so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. His eyes moved slowly across the page, then slower still. I watched his throat tighten, watched his jaw clench, watched the first crack appear in the armor he had spent decades building around himself. He reached the end of the letter, then immediately grabbed another, and another, and another, each one written on a different birthday, each one beginning almost the same way. My darling boy. By the 5th letter, his hands were shaking. By the 7th, tears were rolling down his face. By the 10th, he wasn't even trying to hide them. I had never seen my husband cry. Not when his business nearly collapsed. Not when his grandfather died. Not during the hardest moment of our marriage. Never. Until now. "What is this?" he whispered. I could barely answer. "Your mother wrote them." He stared at me. "No." His voice broke. "No." As though saying it enough times could make it untrue. Then he grabbed another letter. This one had been written on his 18th birthday. I watched his eyes scan the page. Suddenly, he stopped breathing. "What?" I asked softly. He pushed the letter toward me. One sentence had been underlined. "I wanted to come to your graduation, but I promised myself I would never do anything that could make your life harder. I hope one day you'll understand why I stayed away." The tears came harder after that, because for the first time, Ferguson wasn't reading words. He was reading love. Years and years of love, the kind that had survived rejection, hatred, distance, silence, the kind of love that refused to die. Then he stood. His face had changed. The grief was still there, but now something else had joined it. Anger, real anger. "Where's my father?" I knew exactly what was coming, and honestly, so did he. An hour later, we were standing in Andy and Pauline's living room. The moment Andy saw Ferguson's face, I noticed something. Fear. Just for a second. Then it disappeared, replaced by his usual calm smile. "Son, when?" The word exploded from Ferguson's mouth. Andy blinked. "What? When did you start lying to me?" The room went silent. Pauline immediately stood. "Ferguson!" "No." His voice cracked. "No, not this time." He threw the letters onto the coffee table. The envelopes scattered everywhere. And for the first time in 25 years, Andy Woods looked cornered. "What are these?" Ferguson demanded. Nobody answered. He pointed at Pauline. "You told me she abandoned me." Silence. He pointed at Andy. "You told me she didn't want me." More silence. His breathing became ragged. Was any of it true? The question hung in the room. Heavy. Dangerous. Andy rubbed his forehead. For a moment, I actually thought he might deny everything. Then Pauline spoke, and the moment she opened her mouth, I knew she was going to break. "Ferguson." Tears filled her eyes. "I never wanted this." Andy immediately turned toward her. "Pauline?" The warning in his voice was obvious, but it was too late. Years of secrets were finally reaching the surface. "I loved your father," Pauline whispered. Ferguson's face hardened. "I don't care." She shook her head. "No, you need to hear this." Andy stood. "Enough." But Pauline kept talking. "Because some lies become too heavy to carry forever." We thought she would move on. My stomach dropped. Ferguson's eyes widened. Pauline's voice trembled. "We thought she'd leave and start over." Every word felt like a confession. "We didn't think she'd spend her entire life waiting for you." The room fell silent. Then Ferguson slowly turned toward his father. The look in his eyes was devastating. Not hatred, disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper. "You knew." Andy couldn't meet his gaze. For the first time, not once, not ever, he couldn't look his son in the eyes. And that was all the answer Ferguson needed. Everything inside him collapsed. Every memory, every story, every belief, gone. His father had lied. His stepmother had lied. And the woman he had spent years punishing had been innocent. Without another word, Ferguson walked out. I followed him. He didn't go home. I knew where he was going before he even turned onto that familiar private road. Felicia was standing in her garden when his car arrived. The moment she saw him, she froze, because he had never come willingly before. Not once. For several seconds, neither moved. Mother and son, separated by decades, by lies, by pain, by years that could never be returned. Then Ferguson slowly walked toward her. His eyes were red. His face looked broken. Felicia's hands began trembling. "Ferguson." He stopped in front of her. Neither knew what to say. How could they? How do you fit 25 years into a single moment? Finally, his voice cracked. "Why?" One word. One lifetime of pain. Felicia's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you come back for me?" The question shattered her. I saw it happen, saw the grief cross her face, saw the years of regret return all at once. "I tried." Her voice barely worked. "I tried more times than you know." Ferguson looked away, unable to stop crying. Then Felicia whispered the words that finally broke him completely. "I was afraid." He looked at her again, and for the first time, really looked at her, not as the villain from his childhood, not as the woman he had hated, as his mother. "I thought if I kept fighting," she said, "you would suffer for it." Tears streamed down her face. "So I chose the only thing I could." She took a shaky breath. "I chose your safety over my happiness." Ferguson covered his face. The years, the lies, the guilt, everything hit him at once. Then Felicia did something unexpected. She reached into her bag and handed him a small brass key. Confused, he stared at it. "What is this?" Felicia managed a fragile smile. "Come with me." She led him into the house, up a staircase, down a hallway, to a locked door. When she opened it, Ferguson stopped breathing. The room was filled with boxes, shells, albums, files, memories. His memories. Every birthday, every school photograph, every report card, every newspaper clipping, every achievement, every milestone. An entire life preserved, protected, loved, waiting. Felicia looked at him through tears. "I missed enough." Her voice broke completely. "I didn't want to lose the memories too." Ferguson collapsed into her arms, and for the first time in 25 years, he let his mother hold him.
That was 4 months ago. Things are not perfect now. I will not pretend they are. There are still conversations that are difficult to start. Still silences that carry more weight than words. Ferguson is still processing a childhood that was built on a lie. And Felicia is still learning how to exist in her son's life without apologizing for every breath she takes. But healing is not about perfection. It never was. 3 weeks after that night, Felicia came to our home for the first time. I watched Ferguson open the front door and stand there for a moment, just looking at her on his own doorstep. Then he stepped aside and let her in. No grand speech, no ceremony, just a son opening a door that had been closed for far too long. Bernice was 9 years old and curious about everything. She studied Felicia from across the room for approximately 4 minutes before walking straight up to her and asking, "Are you the grandmother I didn't know I had?" Felicia laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and surprised and overwhelmed all at once. "Yes," she said, "I suppose I am." Bernice nodded seriously. "You have nice earrings." And just like that, the ice was broken. Then little Chamberlain, who was 5 and understood very little of what had happened, except that someone new had arrived in his home, climbed without invitation onto the sofa beside Felicia and fell asleep against her arm 20 minutes later. I watched her look down at him, this grandson she had never held, this child who carried his father's face and had no idea what his simple act of trust meant to the woman beside him. Felicia said nothing. She simply rested her hand gently on his back and closed her eyes. 6 months after that night, it was Ferguson's birthday. He didn't ask for anything, he never does. But that morning, a car arrived at our house, a solicitor, 2 witnesses, and a folder thick enough to fill a table. Felicia sat across from her son and transferred everything, every property, every holding, every asset she had built from nothing over 25 years. Ferguson stared at the documents for a long time. Then he looked at her. "You didn't have to do this." She shook her head. "I wrote you a letter on every birthday you didn't know I was there. This one, you'll know." He couldn't speak after that. Neither could I. I followed my husband, thinking he was cheating. I was wrong. What I found instead was a woman who had been threatened into silence, stripped of her son,
and who had spent 25 years building him something he didn't know he was owed. I found a mother who never missed a birthday, even when her son didn't know she was counting. I found a grandmother who gained a granddaughter with nice earrings, and a grandson who fell asleep on her arm before he even knew her name. And I found my husband, the real one, not the man with the walls and the closed doors, and the dead mother who was never